I've learned over the years from every show I do, every mistake I make, there's no better teacher than mistakes and failures. Provided, if you're making the same mistake, over and over again, then you're doing something very wrong in life. But other than that, you could read as many books and go to as many classes and learn as much as you want. And it's like this probably with every trade and every industry. But until you experience a failure and recover from it, you're never going to be prepared for that. And there's no amount of text that can prepare you for those moments. But those moments are the greatest teachers.
Welcome to Side Hustle Hero, the show that is laser focused to inspire you to take action to start or to scale your side hustle income streams. I'm your host, Joan Posivy, author of The Way Success Works, How to Decide, Believe, and Begin to Live Your Best Life. You may not aspire to be a mentalist, as today's guest, David Jason, is. But what he shares about self-promotion, customization for clients, bringing skills he learned onto Zoom into his live performances, and learning from our experiences applies to so many of our industries. And who knows, after you hear today's interview, maybe he will inspire you to start a side hustle as a paid performing mentalist. Be sure to catch the end of episode takeaway to discover how to start strengthening your intuition, which should be your constant traveling companion in life, providing you amazing, timely, profitable guidance. Now, here is my conversation with the mentalist beyond belief, David Jason. Well, welcome, David.
Thank you for having me.
Please clarify for us, what is a mentalist and how does that differ from a magician?
The way I describe it for my 30-second elevator pitch is I will tell you what you're thinking and I will tell you how you're thinking it. But beyond that, my show combines aspects of psychological subtlety, psychological manipulation, behavioral statistics, how we react to in certain environments, to certain stimuli, and a little deception.
Okay.
I won't tell you what that ratio is, but it all combines together to create an experience. And it's an experience where there's mind reading, there's predictions. I'm going to influence your behavior and your actions, and you're going to have no idea what's going on.
Without giving away any secrets, how do you do that? Like what, I guess, skills do you tap into or?
Again, on the psychological side, right? Understanding how our brains work. And I discuss this in my presentations and in my shows. It's a little educational. And I talk about how the brain, for instance, the brain is always looking for patterns in life. And you must know this, right? We look up in the clouds. What do we see? We see faces, we see animals, clowns, whatever.
Yes.
Right? But we're looking for something. We're looking to make a connection with it. And it's a defense mechanism. And how is it a defense mechanism? So think about it like this. If every time you saw something in life, right, you had to relearn what it was, we'd never advance as a society. So the brain is a little lazy because it tries to predict things that you're seeing before you see them. And it makes conclusions for you, which is also why eyewitness testimony is not the best testimony if you talk to, lawyers in courts.
Yes.
So the brain's always looking to make these connections. So understanding that, I understand how to trick the brain. I could make you think you're seeing something that you're not seeing necessarily. That's just one small component of it. And there was a famous prison break, and I forget if it was, I think it might have been Alcatraz, but little by little they were digging. And the day they broke out, they replaced their bodies under the blanket with sheets and pillows. And you have to scratch your head how the guards did their guard check every hour or whatever they walked by to look into the cells. And they didn't notice that those bodies were just there, not moving. And it was only the next day that they discovered this. And if you think about it now, what I just told you about how the brain works, if they walked by that cell every day, 10 times a day, multiplied by how many days, their brains are expecting to see those same people, under those sheets. It's not going to notice any differences or incongruencies.
That's so true and fascinating.
So part of what I do is I exploit the brain.
Yeah. Okay.
That's definitely a part of what I do. Then I tap into people's intuition. And again, that's something that people don't appreciate as much as your own intuition. And that's probably something, in fact, later on, I'm going to have you tap into your intuition because I did a little research and I looked up who you are, and I understand that you've become very successful, and it definitely takes intuition to get to certain levels in life, especially when it comes to business.
Absolutely. I believe our intuition will never fail us. It's just that we're conditioned, most of us, when we grow up, not to trust it.
Exactly. Exactly. So we have to peel through those layers and those guards that have been either artificially, put into place, or just through, life. We have to break those barriers and peel that onion to get back to the intuition. And yeah, your intuition, it's your experience in life. It's your brain telling you things that you don't necessarily remember at a conscious level. It's telling you at a subconscious level when you're walking on the street, something doesn't feel right here.
Well, having said all that, then, David, could anyone train to be a mentalist?
I want to say there's an old, I guess, an adage. Any 10-year-old could do what I do with 20 years experience. A lot of what I do could be taught, and a lot of it, there's, I guess, for the presentation point, right? Audience management, that's a whole different skill set.
Yes.
Right? So it's not just understanding how the brain works and then learning how to deceive it. And it's also putting together an entertaining routine and keeping your audience engaged, but also audience management, knowing who to pick on, who to bring up on stage, who's going to, help you be successful, and as opposed to somebody that's going to be a troublemaker. And just like we spoke about before, that's intuition. And I've learned over the years from every show I do, every mistake I make, there's no better teacher than mistakes and failures.
That's
provided,
so true.
if you're making the same mistake, over and over again, then you're doing something very wrong in life. But other than that, you could read as many books and go to as many classes and learn as much as you want. And it's like this probably with every trade and every industry.
Yes.
But until you experience a failure and recover from it, you're never going to be prepared for that. And there's no amount of text that could prepare you for those moments. But those moments are the greatest teachers. And
Absolutely.
now I don't think about it when I walk in a room before a show, or if it's a virtual show, I'm looking at the audience, and within 5 minutes, I already know the 20 people that I'm going to be calling up to participate in the show. I know the 5 I'm going to shy away from. And then for even specific routines where I want somebody very specific there, I know exactly who it's going to be. Because first of all, when I'm on stage, there has to be a flow. So I can't all of a sudden look around and start deciding who I'm going to call. That would just break up the show. But again, it's more also, I just know by looking at somebody, by walking around, talking a little bit before the show, you just learn. And it's amazing because now so many things, I walk into a room and a show that I was going to do, I may have to change it 5 minutes before because the room is a little different than it was described to me, or the acoustics are off, or the lighting is such a way where I can't do something that I wanted to do, or the room is much bigger than it was supposed to be, or, I was told it was going to be 40 people and there's 140. And these are all things that you learn, by having these mistakes in the beginning, you learn everything. It's amazing.
And contrast that to the first time you walked into an audience setting.
I'll go to the first major time I went into an audience setting, because the first time I went into an audience setting, also a little history on myself. So growing up, and this is where we talk about, can anybody do this? So growing up, I used to like doing magic.
Okay.
I was very into card tricks since I'm like 5 years old. So it was 11 or 12 years old, I discovered a little something else about, what's happening at the magic that I started exploring further. But I was always into the card tricks and doing magic. So I was always used to, performing for people. But when I started doing the mentalism specifically, it's a whole different set of nerves. And I was always nervous about performing mentalism because I always felt that I couldn't command an audience because I didn't have my look. I had a baby face. So I was always concerned about that. But I was 28 years old when I decided to really give it a go.
Okay.
And so I did a couple of like open mics to test it out.
Yes.
Those were fine. But then I agreed to do a performance for a dinner. And I learned so much. This was an epic failure. There was 250 people sitting at round tables, or maybe it was 300 people in this huge room. They had video screens for me, which I've never dealt with before. And my material, I thought it was selected perfectly. It was rehearsed, and everything that I wanted to do worked perfectly. It just didn't go over well. And so I learned so much. So for instance, I learned, first of all, you're in a I'm standing up in a room. If they're round tables, before I even speak, I need everybody to turn and face me.
Yes.
Otherwise, now I'm battling to get their attention.
Mm-hmm.
Second, if I could walk around into the room, not stand, by a podium, but go into the audience and walk around, it keeps them engaged. Also keeps the eyes from just wandering anywhere else. So that was two things I learned from there. The third thing is I was really, I could see the 2 or 3 tables directly in front of me. And even though there was a camera on me, I wasn't addressing the camera. I learned this now, which is why I was able to adapt and pivot to Zoom shows, because you have to forget what you see in front of you. You have to look at the camera to speak to everyone. So if everybody's watching these big screens, but they don't see me at the camera, I'm not engaging anybody personally. So really, I was really only entertaining maybe 30 or 40 people at the show. Mm-hmm. And I could tell, because I could tell only the front was clapping and reacting. I could see in the back, I could see they were having their own conversations. I was like really pissed off about this. But then I also have a book that I read once. And then when I reread it, and it was all about stagecraft and audience management, and all of those points were brought up in there. But again, I read it, but until it happened to me, I didn't fully appreciate what I was reading. But all of that, now when I walk into a room, my whole opening dialogue is very different. Now I'm doing shows for 500-600 people, and it's a whole different experience. And I feel so good after those shows.
And it's so fun to do it now. I remember my first presentation, it was for 18 people. And David, it felt like it could have been 18,000. But I was petrified. But then you do it again and again. And yes, now you get into the 400, 500 or more. And it's like, let's do this. It is so much fun because there's so many learning experiences that you have along the way.
I like to do a mix and mingle before my show. And generally, there'll be a cocktail hour before the main presentation. So I do that for 2 reasons. One, it helps me, first of all, read the whole room because I'm meeting everybody. Yes. 2, it creates a buzz because when I'm doing something right up to you for 2 or 3 minutes and you're seeing something amazing, you're going to be much more interested in after the appetizer, you're going to be very interested in the entree.
Exactly.
So it's like a little marketing for the show beforehand. Perfect. But I'll make sure that I always offer that. I don't even charge extra for that because a lot of people do. But I build that into my price because it's beneficial for both of us.
Absolutely.
And then I'm very specific. I don't want to perform when they're eating. I've already learned I'm not going to compete with their food. So It's always going to be between food and dessert. All things you learn as you're getting experienced.
And there's no substitute for that. Like you said, you can read the books, you can watch the videos, but until you experience it and it's very real, then you absolutely learn from it. Well, when I present a keynote speech or full seminar, I first determine the end goal. What do I want participants or audience members to leave the session with? And that's typically done in conjunction with the organizers or whoever's hired me. And then from there, it's hours of thinking how I'm going to structure things to meet that goal, how I'm going to customize it, writing it, practicing it. I'm curious what that process looks like for you. Like what takes place behind the scenes leading up to when you say hello to your audience?
So first of all, what leads up to that is a lot of homework. Because every show I do, most shows I do, I should say, I never say every. I've learned this in life. Never say always, never speak in absolutes. Because but for most of my shows, it's customized. So I'm having anywhere from 25 minutes to a few hours of talking to the event planner or whoever is in charge of the operation. But I'm going to learn, first of all, if there's any VIPs or if there's any people that you want to make sure that they have a special part of the show or get highlighted in a positive way. My show is not embarrassing at all. Yeah. But you want to get them up on stage and or if they're outgoing or if there's any inside jokes or anecdotes that I should be aware of, as long as they're not inappropriate, and I make the ultimate decision on that. And so I'm doing all of that behind the scenes. And then also when I'm agreeing to do the show after this discovery call, then I have to figure out, I have a very defined beginning, middle, and an end for 2 whole shows. So I could do 2 completely different shows for like a repeat audience, but then the filler is going to differ depending on what I want to communicate and bring out in the show. Mm-hmm. So I might have 30 different routines, but I'm only doing 5 or 6 in a show.
Right.
But it all follows a theme. So that at the end of my show, there's like a little bit of a story, and the end ties in the beginning. Nice. So it's not just that I'm getting out there and I'm just doing, one amazing thing after another, but there's a little bit of a story to be told in the show.
Lovely. So how many hours would you put into preparing for a show?
They're all different. Some shows I create videos. Sometimes I'm creating a teaser video for a company to use in their organization, or especially if it's a fundraiser, then they could send it out in their email blasts to everybody.
Yes.
And it's a customized video that I create there too. And that alone might take me an hour and a half or 2 hours to put together.
Right.
And then a lot of my routines are just all set. So if it takes me maybe 25 minutes to just figure out what I think is going to be the best presentation for this crowd, maybe that's 25 minutes. But then if I'm customizing something to a company, that might take me, a couple of hours as well, because there's artwork that I do, whether it's graphic design, printing, or bringing something physical to the show, or if I'm using it on the screens, but there's going to be some components to that. And then writing, my opening routine is also very customized, and I hand write it, and I have to create. Each one of these is different for every company or for every party. I say companies because I focus in the corporate world, but
yes,
I also do tons of anniversary parties and birthday parties and all other gatherings as well. So, but all the same formula. They're all customized and personalized. So it could be anywhere from 2 hours to 15 hours before a show. It all depends.
And so for our listeners who aren't seeing you, describe one piece. I don't want to call it a trick. What would you call it?
So I would just say a routine or an experience.
A routine. Okay. So one routine or one experience.
And that's why I appreciate that sensitivity. I might have somebody think of, a childhood friend that they haven't thought of in a long time, and I'll sometimes be able to, guess who it is and figure it out.
Really?
Sometimes, not every time. More times than not.
Yes.
But yes. So that's something I might do. I might have somebody think of a song and start, humming it in their head, and then I could pick up on the music and the lyrics and tell them what they're thinking. All sorts of stuff like that. I also might just have somebody pick something from a choice of, say, infinite, and have predicted what they chose. Or it might be something that was limited from one of 20, and still either way.
Right. Sometimes
in the show, I just call in random people, let's create a story together. Point to one person, they say something, point to another person, they say something. And then at the end, there was an envelope on top or a box, and we open it up, and inside was all of those choices that were predicted before the show started.
Wow. So we need to get people to your website to see your demos, see your videos.
For sure that, yes.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the career that you were involved with when you started working as a mentalist, as a side hustle.
Certainly. So for a number of years, I was a director of logistics for a major food retailer or wholesaler. That was for about 12 years. And that was high pressure, the most stressful, as far as I'm concerned. It's probably one of the most stressful industries to be in, dealing with transportation, dealing with warehouses, dealing with laborers, just-in-time food service deliveries,
yes,
food spoilage on the temperature control, just everything that you could imagine that goes wrong. And at the end of the day, when you're working in logistics, your job is to get the product from A to B in the right condition at the right temperature on time. That's the expectation. So if you do that 99.8% of the time, that's your job. The 0.2% is what you're measured on.
Mm.
And it's a constant, it's a constant struggle and almost a combative atmosphere, dealing with buyers, dealing with stores, dealing with the warehouses, because in logistics, I'm in the center of it all.
Okay.
And so even I would go home on the weekends, but there were no weekends off for me, because I still had to worry about what's happening on the weekends at the warehouses. Sunday night, they're picking for the Monday trucks, and it's intense.
Wow.
And those would be like some 70-hour work weeks.
I was going to say, so how on earth did you carve out any time for working on your side hustle?
It was very challenging. And for a number of years, it was more of a hobby that supported itself. I might have done 10 or 15 paid shows a year, right? On the weekends mostly, or if I was lucky enough to get a show at night, really late at night. And what's amazing is, regardless of how tired I am, and regardless of how beat up and stressed I might be, all of a sudden when it comes to performing, there's like an adrenaline kick. And it doesn't matter. I just get in the zone, and you would never know what baggage I'm bringing into the show. It's an amazing thing. Those 10 or 15 shows a year, for me, that felt good, because I wasn't relying it on income. It wasn't my source of income. It was something I really enjoyed doing, and I was able to support it. So there I am working. We have 5 kids living in Long Island. we moved to Pennsylvania to get closer to my wife's family. This was back in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I left the job I was at for 12 or 13 years, and I took a similar role in a different type of company. And it was a toxic company to work with. And it wasn't going to last. And it would have killed me physically because of the stress at this job, but also the toxic environment from the ownership down. It was something that was very bizarre. And after 9 months, I just left it. And it wasn't planned that I said, I'm going to look for a new job. I wasn't, prospecting and networking. I wasn't really, my wife said, just leave it and we'll figure it out. And then she encouraged me to, do a little promoting on the mentalism, because I've never really promoted. Every show I ever got was a word of mouth. Right. So I never really went out there and took out advertisements and marketed myself and promoted myself. So I took a little time off. I rented a theater and I shot, I got an audience and I shot a promo video with a company, and we, produced it, and I started marketing myself, locally, and Facebook and Instagram, although not so much Instagram, mostly Facebook and LinkedIn I started. And little by little, I started getting better jobs. When I say better jobs, part of it was psychologically. I probably wasn't comfortable enough because I wasn't doing it as a career. I didn't feel confident enough to charge a lot of money. Okay. So I knew what competitors of mine were charging for similar type shows. Right. So now I started doing this on my own, and I started pushing that envelope little by little, charging more and more, seeing what I could get away with. And you know what I found also is the more you charge, the more serious you're taken in life. Mm-hmm. You go to a company that's looking for some quality entertainment. I could be the best guy in the world, but if I come up to them and say, I'll do your show for $500, they're not going to take me seriously. But automatically, by asking for more money, and obviously I have to back it up with what I do, but by charging more, you're more respected. I used to give shows for free because in the beginning, to market and promote myself, and I'm sure you're going to ask me later, like, what are good ways of networking? Well, in my world, you find some good causes and you offer a free show. And hopefully people that go to these types of fundraisers, hopefully you'll make contacts there and network. Yes. Well, I found some of these shows that I was doing for free, the organizers wouldn't treat me with respect at all. And it was almost like I was an afterthought. And I was trying to figure this out. And then finally, I read it, or in some forum, we're talking about it. And they said, they're never going to take you serious if you don't take yourself seriously. So that's another lesson learned also. Don't be afraid to ask for more. But little by little, I started getting better shows, and I was charging more money, and I was like really shocked. I look at my wife, I'm like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. And that's when I realized I'm onto something. And with her support, she really encouraged me to pursue this. And then that was right around when COVID hit. So I had my best show to date was my last show was that February. I guess that was 2020.
Yes, March 2020, everything shut down.
Yeah, so my best show to date, which by comparison today, that's nothing. But at that point in my career, if you will, that was my best audience, best reception, best everything. Then everything started shutting down, and my wife said to me, David, you should learn how to do this virtually. And I looked at her and I said, there's no way. I'm
how do I do this?
In front of people, touching people, handing things to people. There's so much engagement in person, and even just seeing somebody. But I also realized, what other choice do I have here? So I gave it a little thought, and I said to her, I'm like, I think maybe there's a couple of things I could do online, and we could try it out. So I offered it in the beginning as a service. I just, put a couple of posts out there. I said, if there was anybody in any isolation units or just really depressed because of what's going on, and it needs a quick pick me up, I'm happy to 10, 15 minutes, we'll go on Zoom. So I did that for a couple of weeks. Surprisingly, not too many people responded to that. I got a lot of loves and, hearts on it. But I only maybe got one or two people that were interested in that. But then I started thinking about, as I was doing that, I said, if I take this, but tweak it just a little bit, I think I could do that online. If I did this and change this presentation, I think I could do this. And then all of a sudden, 2-3 weeks later, I said to her, I think I could put together a show online. So I tested it out. I did 3 or 4 shows. Now this is end of March, early April now. Right. 2020. Yeah. And I did a couple of shows for free. And I just wanted to see the audience response. The first show I did was almost like that first show I did when I told you about that dinner.
Yes.
It was horrible. I was setting up my computer in front of me with the laptop. I had no equipment, nothing, just using the laptop. And I was walking around like in my show, but just in a smaller space
I
to
see.
try to keep
Yeah.
the camera angles.
Yes.
At the end of the show, which was a good 45 minutes, everybody liked it because I guess I'm engaging and the content is entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But the technical feedback I got from some of my more trusted confidants and friends on the show,
Yeah.
the one thing was I decided the next show I'm going to sit down the whole time.
Yes.
And then two, I had to be careful with some of the camera angles because of the autofocus on the laptop. I invested in a couple of cameras by the end of at the end of all this, but a couple of routines I thought were going to hit really big. They didn't hit so big. And while all of this was happening, now I did 3 or 4 shows and they were all received very well as far as I'm concerned for a platform I never considered performing. I mean, think about this concept that I did a show a while back. There was a woman on there in Hawaii. There was another one, I think, in Australia, and there was a guy in California, and then somebody in New York. And I have people from 4 corners of the world practically, and I'm able to read somebody's mind from 3,000 miles away. Like, that's an amazing concept when you think about it.
Absolutely.
We talk about the virtual performing later, about the beauty of what it actually allows you to connect people with. But here I am. It was turning out well. And then all of a sudden I joined, everybody's on Facebook all of a sudden when COVID hit, their membership must have gone up in usage. But all of a sudden I joined a Facebook group of performers specifically talking about Zoom performing.
And you're opening yourself up to such a larger audience. Like you said, you had people there from the 4 corners of the world. And I love how you went from saying to your wife, essentially, that's a crazy idea, I can't do that, to changing the question to, well, how could I? And then you start playing around with the idea, do your first show, and then go, oh, okay, I didn't consider that, and tweak that and improve it. And I love the idea of that Facebook group too.
That's priceless. What we learned from each other in this group. After learning how to do all of this online, I took it into the real world. And my wife always wanted me to add production value to my shows. I just never knew how without hiring a team. And I'm still a one-man operator. So I don't have a team of advisors and technical advisors, and I'm not, and production managers. No one's writing my shows for me. I'm not that big yet.
Yet.
So for now, I'm going out there and I'm making sure now that the venues have a screen for me to plug into, and I'm doing my checks beforehand. But now I create a lot of my visual aids on a program on the computer, and I bring a clicker with me, a little remote control, so that as I'm doing my show, I could click through the different overlays or the music as I want to bring the mood up into the show. And it's just, these are all things I learned because I was performing online. And to make it more engaging online, you want to have all those different visuals to keep it stimulating.
Are you still involved with the Facebook group?
Absolutely. It's not as active as it was, say, a year ago.
Yeah.
Because again, most of the world did open back up.
I did want to ask you, and you've touched on this a couple times already, how you are marketing yourself, what's working best. I love the idea about offering your services initially, as you're getting known, for free as a fundraiser.
That's a great way to, whatever your industry is, whatever you're working on as a side hustle, as long as you could afford to. Like for me, it's easy for me it's just my time. So I'm happy to get out there. It's a great investment for me to have time in front of people. Social media, anytime I do a show, I'm posting a picture after the show. This is what I could do for your company. Let them have an experience like this, and it's more about the reactions of the people. And again, it's not about me. It's not about what I do. And even in my show, it's not about me. It's about us, as it's a whole collaboration with my audiences. Part of it is one-on-one interactions that people are watching, but the overall theme is we're all contributing in some in big ways, some in small ways, and some of the routines I do, everybody is actively participating from their seats and consciously thinking of something, or if we're just throwing out a ball and whoever catches it calls things out. It's just very random, but everybody's on edge because it could be anybody. So Facebook has been great also because especially what really helped me was, I hate to say it because, a lot of people were decimated by COVID. Yes. COVID helped me, the shutdowns, not COVID, but, the shutdowns, because now, especially when I pivoted to performing online, I'm in a niche now. Not a lot of people were doing this in the beginning. More and more people started doing it, when they realized COVID is here to stay. right? In the beginning, I remember a lot of colleagues and performers even said, like, it's not worth even learning how to do all this for a few months. 8 months later, I better learn how to do this. So in the beginning, I was one of the pioneers, and I didn't even know I was one of the pioneers because I wasn't even in this group. This was just something I decided I have to do. So any company that had meetings and they were doing them on Zoom, they needed something more fresh, more to pick me up, a morale booster.
Nice.
And bartering is another great thing that you could do as a side hustle, especially, like I said, some people, it's not just time. Some people, it's materials, right? So you could barter for your own services, whether it's services you need, you could barter with, you need your toilet fixed. You could barter with the plumber. You could barter with the electrician. You could, anything you could barter for that makes sense to whatever extent you think it's appropriate to barter. And again, you're getting, at the end of the day, you're getting your exposure. So you want to get your message, your product, whatever it is, you want it out as much as possible. You want people talking about it. So if bartering is a way to go, that's a great, avenue as well. At the end of the day, you're getting the results, and that's a way of, capturing your costs and covering yourself.
One of my first barters that I did, this is decades ago now, was the first audio tape program that I ever put out. I exchanged that for someone who owned a seafood store, and it was a large container of Alaskan king crab's legs. Traded for my audio program. It was great. So what's next for the Mentalist Beyond Belief?
So what's next is one, like I said, I'm in the process. I just moved. And part of the reason we moved to Florida. So I don't know how familiar you are with the States, but I was in the Northeast, and a lot of my local business was in the Northeast. A couple of weeks ago, I had to fly into Philly for a show. As long as they're paying me, I'll fly in.
Sure.
But I opened myself up nationally. Once I moved here to Florida, we moved here because, one, we wanted better weather, 23/7 sunshine here. We like the outdoor life. My kids are very active. We like being outside. But Orlando has conference centers where 24/7 are trade shows and conventions. And the same thing in Jacksonville. There's these huge corporate presences, and that's really why I want to focus my efforts. I do well on trade shows, and then at the end of those trade shows at night, like I said, these companies take out their clients or their customers, they wine and dine them, and my show is a perfect end of the night for them. So that's something that I really wanted to focus on. So we came here for me to market there.
How do you reach out to those places?
I won't call it cold call because I'm not going to be making phone calls, but I'm going to go to the conference centers. I'm going to go up and introduce myself. I'm going to offer demos. I'm going to walk into businesses, and I have a couple of event planning websites, these gig sites that I get leads from. So now that I've localized myself over here, I'm getting more leads that are locally, and I know it's going to be a little bit of a process. But just like in the Northeast, in New York and Pennsylvania, where I was living, when I went from doing it part-time to full-time, and this is where I was saying there's a trajectory that I saw, but I went from doing, I think, in 2018, I did, 17 or 16 paid shows. In 2019, I did 18 shows.
Okay.
So then 2020, I did 53 shows. And then 2021, I broke 104 shows.
Nice. Congratulations, David.
And it was almost 50-50 virtual versus in person.
Okay.
So the trajectory is there. And so my goal is to stay around, I want to be able to average about 150 shows a year. Now my trajectory took a big downturn because of this move. So I'm not going to end this year with 100 shows, but that doesn't even bother me because I accounted for that in the move and in the transition. But I'm also, the more bigger shows I could get that I could charge more money, the less I have to subsidize with smaller shows.
Right.
So I'd rather even do, I'd rather do 50 shows that pay me $10,000 a show than to do 200 shows. Now I'm not getting $10,000 a shows, but I'd rather do less shows at a better quality than more shows, although I like performing. So it's kind of either way is fine. But my goal is to average about 150 shows so that I could have the highs and the lows and be comfortable.
Well, before we wrap up, is there something I should have asked you, David, that I haven't yet?
I mean, I was kind of doing this for a long time before I decided to do it full time.
Yes.
So it wasn't scary for me to take a leap as far as performing. It was just scary for me to leave the comfort of a steady paycheck.
For sure.
But I was very lucky that I had the support of my wife and my family. who was encouraging me to do this because she saw the stress that everything else was causing me. But I'll tell you this, and I don't know what everybody's situation is. Some people, maybe they can't afford to, stop working to do their side hustle, and they have to really keep it as a side hustle. I think the advice I used to read as a performer was, when your side hustle starts paying you more than your regular job, or when you have to start turning away business because you're too busy, those are the two indicators that it's time to take that leap.
Mm.
But if you believe in yourself and you really think you have something to offer, I just really feel, I don't know, maybe I'm getting older in life and more experienced, but this whole YOLO movement, right? You only live once, that
Yes.
really became popular with COVID. It's sort of true. Like, if you're working a job that's just to get the paycheck, it's so unsatisfying, and you're never going to be happy. And you're probably never going to be as good at that job as you could be doing something that you're passionate about. And I enjoy working in logistics. It's not that I didn't enjoy it and I was passionate about it. I was very lucky in that world, but the stress was killing me. And now I have more time that I'm able to spend with my family because I'm home more.
Yes. What's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, David?
So the best way is my website, which is www.davidjason.com. My name, David, Jaison.com.
Okay.
You could see some video content of me on my website, although I don't publish a lot of video because a lot of what I do is there's an element of surprise in the routines themselves. And again, like I said, it's not just telling you what you're thinking, but it's the whole process.
Well, thank you, David, for introducing us to the life of a mentalist, for our fun and informative conversation, and for being today's side hustle hero.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
One component of David's success is his highly developed intuition. Intuition is one of 6 mental faculties that we all possess. But sadly, most of us are raised not to trust it because it requires that we believe and act on something we can't see. David was correct when he alluded to my reliance on intuition in business. To the best of my ability, I make it my constant traveling companion. Yours will guide you to see opportunities and keep you out of trouble. One day, my business partner and I were in a pub, and after about 45 minutes or so, I got the most uncomfortable feeling. It's like the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And as I scanned the room, I didn't see anything particularly alarming, but there was one guy seated a couple of tables away that I got a very uncomfortable feeling about. So I told my partner, we need to leave. I said, I don't know exactly what it is, but we need to go, which we did. By then, he knew me well enough not to question it. Would something have happened if we had stayed? I don't know, but I can tell you I have learned to trust it. I rely on it a lot traveling overseas as well as in my own city. I would rather vote with my feet and stay safe. I remember at one event when I was about to go on stage to present a seminar, the person who headed up the organization was introducing me, and he had said that the previous year he had heard me suggest during a presentation that by using one's intuition, you could be guided to a parking spot in any city. And he went on to say that he thought that was crazy. I thought Joan had lost it. It sounded so bizarre. But then he figured, you know what? I got nothing to lose. And he said, I tried what she said, and damn it, it worked. So listen up. That was his introduction. A way to develop your intuition is by simply beginning to tap into it. Start with things that are not life-altering decisions, but rather easy things like finding a parking spot. So before heading out, visualize in your mind's eye a parking spot at your destination. And as you're driving, if there's suddenly a bit of traffic, don't be alarmed. Maybe you need to arrive at your destination a minute or two later for a spot to be opened up. If you're getting close and you would normally turn left, but you get a feeling that you should turn right and see what happens. It's super fun to be led to that open parking spot. And eventually, as you work with it and fine-tune your sensitivity to be able to differentiate between what's intuition that's guiding you versus your conditioned habit patterns, it can become your constant traveling companion in life. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find a link to David's website and the show notes on our website, sidehustleheropodcast.com. joanpos.com. And I'd love to hear your feedback on the show, on the guests, how this podcast is helping you. What areas could we do better? Let me know about your parking spot exercise. Shoot me an email message to hello@joanposivy.com or by DM on Instagram @joanposivy. Thanks for listening and hustle on.